all the scientific institutions of Trieste, City of Knowledge, as well as the institutions that collaborated with us. A special thanks goes to the festival's main partner, the partners and content partners for their crucial contributions. Thanks also to the media and technical partners. Lastly, a heartfelt thanks to the 200 volunteers who made this edition possible. One final note. I'd like to remind you that the next session will last 75 minutes, with the final 15 minutes dedicated to your questions. Please also remember to check the updated event schedule on www.triestenext.t, which you can access via the QR code. Enjoy the event and have a great festival.
Okay, so good afternoon to everybody, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here for this that I hope it will be an interesting panel discussion on a theme, these global challenges using AI. My name is Serafina Di Gioia, and I'm a senior postdoctoral fellow at ICTP, working on applied machine learning in climate and astrophysics. And I will be accompanied during this panel starting from my left, Professor Marco Zennaro, working at ICTP on tiny machine learning application for sustainable development, and Professor Teresa Scantamburlo, working at the Università Foscari in Venice on AI governance and ethics of AI. And here on my right, Professor Eiman Kanjo, head of the Smart Sensing Lab at Nottingham, Trent University, coming from UK, who is one of the main experts in the world of the development and co-design of tiny machine learning application for wearables. The name of today's debate may seem a bit ambitious, but I promise that we will remain very practical and try to be as clear as much as possible while approaching two very hot topics for the contemporary society. One is the development of AI, and the other, the future of human life on Earth. In particular, we will focus on a tiny subfield of AI called tiny machine learning. Tiny machine learning scientists study small AI models executable on small, low power and low cost devices, for these called embedded devices, for these called tiny. And a pervasive example of these tiny machine learning devices are the wearables that accompany our daily lives, and like our smartwatches. I will give the word starting from Professor Eiman Kanjo. So can you give us a practical introduction to the tiny machine learning application, focusing in particular to the pipeline needed to analyze the data collected by the sensor, the typical power requirement of this kind of sensor, and the requirement in terms of latency? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You are. He's already. He's already there.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yes, thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me to this panel. So let me start with this cute image showing how can we move from this crazy trend at the moment with all these large models with millions or even billions of parameters, creating large models that require really expensive and not very, let's say, energy-friendly resources, massive computational, can you hear me? Sorry. Computational resources. How can we move from that to something very, very small with much less requirements for energy that is low cost and can protect privacy? So that's the promise of tiny ML in general. And the idea is that how can we make AI available for everybody, whether it's in urban, rural areas, whether it's for developed countries, and so on. So we start with this concept, and the idea is to enable everyone to access AI resources. If you I mean, if I ask you, for example, do you have wearable with you at the moment? Do you use wearable? Anyone with smartwatches? You do. But some people saying they don't have. Is there a reason why you don't have wearable? Expensive? Are there any other reasons? Like,
body. That's
oh,
what
I see. So
think.
you're worried about the radiation that might impact. Yeah. How about the privacy issues? Are you happy to share your data with remote servers? So I think there are many concerns at the moment, because these are personal devices that can, collect useful data and then give us some interesting analysis to help improving our lifestyle. But the problem is that many people, including myself, are concerned about sharing our own personal data. So that's why the idea of processing the data on the device itself. So imagine like you have this wearable with AI power that you don't need to share any data with the remote server. You don't need to send your data to Google, Microsoft, whoever. You process it here and get the insights directly on your device. That might give you the sense of, oh, I have full control of my device. And then might be, costs as well. That's something we're trying also to tackle, the low energy aspects. So that might give people more confidence in terms of like, wearable are personal, but also can protect your data and the way we share data. What makes a TinyML system or a wearable system that has TinyML capabilities is that this intersection between machine learning, so you have the power of AI on the device itself, and then you have the sensors, like for example, if you are sensing for healthcare related applications, but also you have this device. Microcontroller is like a tiny device. Thank you, Marco, gave me this. So something really tiny. I mean, this is a very small microcontroller with a camera and a processor that can process AI. And you could imagine comparing this to a large computer or a data center or large server, you can still run AI models on that. And that can open so many possibilities in terms of applications, because you could embed it in a wearable, you could embed it. Actually, we have some of these devices on collars that can be worn by animals, by cows and so on. So there are many possibilities. You have this computing tool, the microcontroller, and then you have the machine learning and you have the sensors. The combination of all of these things will give you the access to a very powerful tool. And as I said, the most important aspects of it, the privacy protection, and also the cost and the energy which make it accessible to a large number of people. Do you want me to talk about the pipeline of TinyML or? Well, yeah, I could, yeah, okay, very quickly. I mean, I don't want to go into very technical details, but one of the most, the main aspects of this work, obviously the hardware itself, to have small device with memory that can store, can, process, and the processor that is powerful enough to process data. But also we work a lot on making these AI models smaller. So everybody's working towards big models for, the ChatGPT, generative AI, LLM, and so on. We try to do the opposite, to take these models and make them smaller so they can fit on this device, something we call model reduction, model optimization. So you would see, like in this diagram, and these are some of the main building blocks of TinyML. We do a lot of work on compressing the data, for example, making it smaller. For those who are familiar with neurons, and the main aspects of a model, we try to, remove anything that is redundant. So the model is small, it can fit on the device that has a very small memory. We work on the multimodal sensors, so you have lots of sensors that can collect data. It depends on the application, of course, the inference. There's one more important aspect of this, is that these devices are personal. So usually AI models work on ready data, a data set that works for a large number of people or from population. In order to personalize the experience, we need to add some kind of tools to enable people to collect their own data and retrain the model on the device. That is called on-device learning. So how can we, for example, give you a wearable, but then customize it later onto your own data? So it's more personal. So it can detect, for example, a particular health condition or something like this. That's in a nutshell, but I will go through some of these later on.
Thank you very much, Eiman. Eiman talked about the work that she's been doing, and other researchers in the field have been doing to make these models smaller. But today, at least half of the tiny machine learning applications developed in the world are still relying on a cloud-centric architecture that requires strong connectivity, like a G5 or 4G network, and plus big computational resources on the cloud. And both these technologies are not very available in developing countries. So my next question is for Professor Marco Zennaro. What should be done, in your opinion, in terms of software and hardware implementation to adapt tiny machine learning application in order to ease the use in developing countries?
Okay, thank you very much, Serafina, for the question. So we're used to live in a very data-rich world. So we're in Trieste now. There's many sensors all around us, from weather stations to air quality sensors, radiation sensors. I'm pretty sure that in this environment we also have many sensors monitoring the environment. That's not the case in other parts of the world. As you know, not everyone is connected to the internet still now in 2024. So a question for you: which percentage do you think is connected to the internet right now? We have 8 billion people. Which percentage of the world population has access to the internet? 60%? Any other guesses? And that's first answer was correct. It's about 60%. So we still have 40% of the world population that has no connectivity at all. So if you don't have a connectivity, you cannot add sensors to monitor the environment. And guess what? In many of these places, there's not enough sensors. So now you have an issue where you want to have, measurements, but you don't have connectivity. So that's one issue. Second issue, that even in places where we do have connectivity, like Italy or Europe, we're not using all this data to make sense of the environment. In fact, daily we produce about 2.5 exabytes of data. So that is 2.5 followed by 12 zeros. So a huge amount of data produced all over the world daily. And statistics say that we use between 1 and 10% of that data. So we're collecting a lot of data, but we're not analyzing that data, because sending data to the cloud and having machine learning models on the cloud to analyze the data is very expensive from the monetary point of view, from the energy point of view as well. So this idea that Eiman just presented of making sense of the data close to the source where the data is produced, of course, makes a lot of sense. And it can benefit many of these countries that have no connectivity. You can place sensors in the middle of nowhere with no connectivity. You can analyze the data and you can make sense of the data and send that data to local communities or local researchers. So I hope, Serafina, that answered your question.
Thank you very much, Marco. And Eiman already introduced another very hot topics in the field of tiny machine learning research, that are the ethical issues associated to these tiny machine learning application, and in particular, more in general, to AI applications. So my next question is for Teresa. Can you discuss a bit what are the most pressing ethical issues associated with this technology? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serafina, and thanks to the other speakers to introduce these fascinating topics. First of all, as a part of machine learning, this tiny machine learning research area shares some concerns with the wider community. So aspects concerning the data protections, but also potential biases. But since it is, I would say, a niche at the moment within the community, I think these ethical issues should be considered in a slightly different ways. So I believe that the tiny machine learning has the potential to have a positive impact on ethics and societies. On the other hand, it could also pose some challenges, so raise concerns. So on the side of the positive aspects, I think that there is for sure a pros on the environmental impact, because if we have devices consuming less energy, this makes machine learning more accessible and less impactful on the environment, especially in those environments in which you might have issues with respect to these energy aspects. Also, another positive impact could be increasing these sensing activities, because, for example, if you look at the data used by machine learning algorithms, most of these data come from Western countries, or at least from Western part of the world. So enabling this technology would allow us to collect more data from as part of the population, which are less considered in the machine learning practices. So this would be helpful. On the other hand, another positive aspect, I think, could be decentralize the analysis. So having these learning algorithms working in devices and not sharing or not spreading data and communicating to clouds, this would at least be positive for the data protection. So reducing data breaches, so violations of data protection aspects. On the other side, tiny machine learning is not, it is not necessarily ideal on all aspects of ethics, because, for example, there might be also negative aspects, or at least risks that should be considered carefully. And one of these, for example, might be the robustness of the system, because if you think these models can be used in devices, so you can train algorithms and then use the algorithms directly on the devices. But if you, for example, don't check carefully for biases or potential discriminatory outcomes, you might use these devices for a wider population. And if you don't update, for example, the models with the new data that could be more representative of the population that are used by the population which are represented in the models, this may amplify the biases or the discriminatory effects. So I think, or there might be also concerns for securities, because there might be attacks, for example, if the learning algorithms are spread across the devices on edge computings, and there are attacks, for example, changing the parameters in the models, and there are no regular checks on the performance and the accuracy of these models, this might be more exposed, to wider attacks, I think, and so the so-called model poisoning. So this might be an issue. So this would require a wider governance of these robustness aspects. So I would, at the moment, don't add the further aspects, but these are just a few stimuli for the ethical debates around this specific research area of machine learning.
Yes. Yes.
Before we move to the next topic, actually, you are very right. And then it's not just about the AI models. The AI is one element when it comes to tiny ML. Remember, these are very small devices. So if it falls in the wrong hand, it can cause real, damage. For example, we worked heavily with the Met Police in London on, educating people, but also the policing services, on the danger of using smart devices by criminals, for example, who can track people, who can, do all sorts of applications that are unethical. So AI biases is one thing that's, that we need to look at, but the only thing, because the technology is still developing, we try to look at how can we make the technology work at the moment, but we need to look at the misuse of technology. But on the positive side, that like if criminals start to be smarter in the way they use technologies, technologists also can be smarter in the way that they can detect misuse. So it's a really ongoing circle in terms of how can we prevent the misuse of technology, beside the issues that might come with AI biases and so on.
Thank you for your opinion on this, Professor Eiman. I wanted to come back to something that you introduced in the slide that you showed before, that is the power to democratize AI that tiny machine learning application represent. We have seen in computer science department that every year more young scientists are becoming passionate advocates of this technology for its power of democratization. So I wanted to ask you if you can explain how this technology is democratizing AI and making it more inclusive with respect in particular to gender and geographical origin.
I could talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done in terms of applications and how we're making it available in different domains. I will talk about foundation later on. So this is some of the early work that we have done in the past at Cambridge University. That's before the rise of AI, where we used mobile phone and small tiny devices to monitor pollution and noise in cities using crowd sensing. I don't know if you are familiar with this concept, where you ask members of the public, for example, to collect data or process data for you that can contribute to the overall scientific vision, for example. So in that case, you could see here, for example, here, these little traces around Cambridge City. These are noise levels collected by cycling couriers who carried our devices. This is an old work now, but that's where we started, this kind of technologies. How can we collect data and process it at a larger scale, at a city scale, for example, to understand the spread of noise pollution, or pollution levels in terms of carbon monoxide, or other pollutants. But then over the years, we started to realize that we don't just look at the environmental aspects of things. We need to look at the impact of the environment on health and well-being. So that's where I started to look at health in general and well-being, and how can we come up with solutions to first understand the impact of the environment or health conditions, but also what can we do about it, whether we can develop or create some kind of interventions using small devices that can help in terms of tackling health issues. So for example, here you could see a little device that we have worked on. It's like a tiny fidgeting device. I don't know if any of you used fidgeting cubes before. Little devices that you could click. They are very, very cheap. Similar like when you click your pen all the time to feel less stressed. So you could order these like online, they are 2-3 euros. So we thought, why don't we add computational power inside these devices to understand how people, deal with stress, and maybe we could come up with a solution in the future. We're still not there yet, where we can send haptic feedback, a physical feedback. Like for example, someone's feeling stressed, feeling lonely, you get this kind of pulse saying, oh, you are fine, you are okay. Or if you are about to go to an interview or a meeting, you have this kind of presence that someone is thinking of you. You could see here that we have heart rate monitors and a sensor called EDA, which can sense the sweat level in a person. These are some of the early attempts of us creating wearable or devices that can help with health and well-being. But then we also, as I mentioned before, we worked with the policing service in terms of protecting women especially vulnerable women and areas such as domestic abuse, where we could try to help to support women in their journeys, whether at home or on the street. We've been working on applications related to agriculture at the moment. So my PhD student at the moment is working on real-world deployment in the farm, where we have developed collars with tiny MLD tools that can sense movement, temperature, and so on. Crowd sensing, for example, we work with the Nottingham City Council on different ways where we can, especially during COVID time, we started to think, how can we use this technology to see if people are gathering in areas in the city where they shouldn't be gathering at that time. All of these applications are progressing in a way that responds to the advancement of technology. So what we had before, like a few years ago, now is different. These technologies are really getting much smarter with more powerful processors that can do more powerful things. I have this application, but we can talk about it afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And so I wanted to go back to Teresa, because we started to discuss about the impact of tiny machine learning application on the society. So it came to my mind like a huge legal proposition that will impact in the future years a lot, like the society of users of tiny machine learning application, the society of developers of this technology. That is the European AI Act that entered into force in August. And more in general, I wanted to ask to Teresa to illustrate the European strategy for AI and what are the main goals of this strategy and of the AI Act. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Yes, tiny machine learning has a part of machine learning and AI technology will be potentially affected by the new AI regulation. And this is an effort, a huge effort in Europe, but in the world, because it is the first basically regulation on AI. I'm curious to know if this regulation, is known, or at least have you ever heard of this AI Act, I think? Okay. Could you, yes, could you raise your hands, those who have heard of? Okay, so the others have never heard of the AI regulation. Okay, no, okay. Yeah, no, but it's good, because I've also conducted a survey with of 4,000 Europeans, and actually was 3 years ago, the Commission has just introduced the proposal, and still the percentage of people knowing this proposal was less than 30%, and I think is still not well known. But the European Union has introduced this regulation, which will affect all the providers of AI systems, and consequently also the users. So users and those who deploy AI, but also those who use like systems, commercial applications, have a new protection, because this regulation is supposed to protect citizens and in Europe, and affect all the deployers and providers. So what this regulation is about? This regulation basically aims at protecting human rights, first of all, and it introduces some requirements. The main architecture of the regulation is a risk-based approach. So basically, the regulation doesn't regulate everything in an equally way, but it classifies AI systems according to the risk they pose to society. So there are some AI systems which are prohibited because they pose an unacceptable risk. So, for example, systems like social scoring systems similar systems to those we have heard of in China, perhaps, I don't know, in which people are scored by, for example, national authorities, or even systems that can use techniques to manipulate or deceive people. These are prohibited. Then there are other systems which are considered posing a high risk. And these systems are either applications used as a safety component of products which have already regulated, like medical devices, for example, or even applications operating in some critical sectors, like education, hiring, migration, for example. These are considered like critical areas in which we should be careful and consider the risk such system that could be highly potentially very impactful and posing harms. Then there are systems that could pose transparency risk. So they are considered more limited risks. And these, for example, include chatbots or AI systems interacting with people. And for these different classes of AI systems, the provider should consider different requirements. So, for example, the main class that is regulated include AI high-risk systems. And for those systems, for example, a provider should consider aspects concerning the data protection. So should consider for what purpose the data are collected for the training, for example. So in the case of uses in the police or even machine learning systems used by the police, in that case, we should consider for what purpose and if this purpose is lawful, and then checking for biases. So, for example, whether there are part of the population that should be discriminated. So, for example, that in the case of police, if there are some part of the population which is observed or over monitored, and so this could increase the risk of feedback loops. And there are many other requirements also concerning the documentations of all the technical aspects. So which accuracy measures has been used to measure the performance of the AI systems, all the measures that have been checked for potential security risks. And also another important requirement is the risk assessment. So providers of AI systems should consider in which ways, for example, AI systems can be misused. So these are several requirements that, of course, can be heavy requirements, but are proposed for the benefit of society. And of course, I cannot be exhaustive, but I just give you some information, and I think I can stop now.
We will have also space later for questions from the public. So now we shift a bit the focus to a more to global scale, and again we go back to some initiative, very important initiative for the development of tiny machine learning application in developing countries. In 2021, Professor Marco Zennaro with other colleagues from Harvard University built a network of academic institutions based in developing countries called Tiny Machine Learning for Development in order to establish best practices in TinyML all over the world. How is this initiative proceeding, Marco, and how does this initiative relate with the Sustainable Development Goals? And what is the next step to do, in your opinion?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So before answering, I would like to TinyML device. So you've heard about TinyML, but you haven't seen the devices. So just to give you a feeling of how it looks like. So this, I mean, inside this device, there's a microcontroller, which costs roughly €5. So you can run machine learning on a really low cost device. This has a screen just for the purpose of, seeing the demo and seeing how it works. This specifically has a small camera and it will recognize a person. So you just put it in front and it will tell you it's a person. So if you have worked on, machine learning applications, you know that it's kind of tricky. You need to have a large data set and you get a model. So to shrink that model in a €5 device is quite amazing. And again, don't forget that the model is running on the device. So there's no connectivity to any cloud service. There's no Wi-Fi going on. The whole model runs on the device. So let me pass it around. And I'm curious to know at the end if it recognizes everyone. So as Teresa was saying, these systems can be biased, right? So if you have, let's say, glasses or, you're older, younger, it might not recognize a person. So I'm really curious to see how the model works, okay? Okay, so to get back to Serafina's question, yeah. So when I learned about TinyML and working in developing countries and with scientists in developing countries, we thought that it was a good idea to set up a network of people working on TinyML or interested in TinyML in the Global South. So together with colleagues from Harvard, we decided to set up a group to kind of encourage researchers to get into TinyML, because again, it's a really interesting topic in terms of research and in terms of applications. So nowadays we have about 60 universities from the Global South, from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, where people work and teach TinyML. So we had like different steps, different steps in our strategy. So the first one was to get hardware in the hands of people. So as much as those are super low cost devices, getting them in many countries is still a challenge. So we did that. Now they all have devices. Second one was to develop training courses so that people could not only learn about TinyML, but they would have open documentation to teach TinyML. And that was, again, quite successful. Now we have semester courses in places ranging from, Argentina, Colombia, several African countries and Asian countries as well, where in the computer science curriculum, they teach TinyML as one of the topics. And the third one was to look at application that could be of impact in these countries. And that was also quite interesting because you learn that, researchers in different places have kind of similar issues that they want to solve. So just one example can come from a plant disease detection. So these devices, as you will see, they have a camera, so they can, detect diseases in plants just by analyzing the images, but people have the same plants and the same diseases in different places. So you can have people from, again, Colombia and from Kenya working on coffee disease because they have kind of the same issue. So they can share the same data set. And as Eiman was mentioning, collecting this data is also a big challenge because when you're looking at specific application, there is no data set in the West about coffee disease. So you need to collect data, you share the data, and then you can come with appropriate models. You were asking Serafina about the next steps. And the next steps is about looking at global challenges. So one challenge that we kind of identified has to do with mosquitoes. As you know, I mean, we have mosquitoes here as well, but in many countries, they bring malaria, they bring dengue. So being able to classify mosquitoes from their sound, from the wing beat is quite interesting. So we're collecting now data sets. We're working with scientists on the ground in many different places to be able to use these small devices to detect mosquitoes and to kind of alert population when the mosquitoes are bringing malaria, for example. So from the sound of the wings, you can even detect if there's blood in the mosquito or not. So we're looking at these kind of global challenges for our community.
Thank you very much, Marco. So now we go again to Eiman for the first question on the next round. That will be the last before your question. That I know will be many. So we have discussed different ways in which tiny machine learning can become more inclusive with respect to gender, geographical origin, and languages. of the individuals that are using the technology and developing the technology. But something often neglected in public debates like this is the importance of co-design strategy of AI, and in particular tiny machine learning application for individuals with physical and intellectual impairments. And I know that you are working a lot on the topic in the last year, in particular on the co-design of tangible interface for individuals with intellectual impairments, and because these interfaces are thought to be able to reduce the biases connected to the use of self-reporting interfaces. So can you talk us a bit of this work? Thank you.
Just before I talk about this, in my lab, we were planning to build a device for mosquitoes, but for different purpose, to detect and kill the mosquitoes. I don't know how ethical is that. We need to have a discussion with this, whether this is ethical or not. But yeah, I will talk about two different applications. I mean, we do a lot, but these particular ones appeal to a wide range of users or participants. Most of the research that we do in my lab is in collaboration with end user organizations, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a school or a park that can, host different events, activities, and so on. This particular application, we worked on it in collaboration with Nottinghamshire County Council. We had a large project funding, and the idea at the beginning was to attract people to visit their local parks, local environment in general, and to motivate people to be physically active. Unfortunately, especially in UK, because of the weather, for example, you might not have this problem as much as we have, that people sometimes don't walk as much, and they hesitate to visit their local parks and so on, especially for young people, and sometimes others with a lot of responsibilities. So we thought about how can we connect people with these places? How can we make them be more active, but also enjoy and learn more about it. So in this project, we worked in partnership with Nottingham Forest, home of Robin Hood, and then other parks. One of the parks called Rufford Park, which has many heritage and historical features as well. And we built this kind of system in combination of IoT, edge computing. You could see here, for example, this is a device that we use to detect proximity to see if someone is close to this device or not, which works in similar way to GPS tracking, but we didn't want to use GPS on devices. We wanted to keep it approximate, part of the gaming experience. These are NFC tags, so if you tap that tag, it will say that you've done something here. So this is part of the game experience. The idea initially was to give the users, like you can see here on the app interface, say, for example, 15 different places around the park, and people have to go and visit these 15 or whatever they can. And then they get some kind of rewards from the park because of our partnership. They get free coffee or some rewards, similar to like Easter egg hunt or a treasure hunt challenges, but using mobile phone and wearable technology and so on. The interesting thing when you mentioned vulnerable people, we tried to make it in a way that it works for everyone. Anyone who goes to the park should be able to participate. So we decided not to have a specific route or specific time. Whenever you go, you can take part. Just put the app on and you can take part. You don't need to follow specific routes. So wherever you go, you could in a way. It's very, very simple. All what you need is really to walk as much as possible, and you get some notifications every now and then, or like a vibration to say, oh, you've got this. Now, the only thing that you need to know to do when you are walking around the park is that when you reach specific point of interest, the app gives you some challenge. Like, for example, if you reach this bridge in the park, you see this tag which is it's called NFC, near field communication tag. So the user has to put the mobile phone on the tag, and then they will earn a point. In other places, you might see here, if they come near a specific sculpture or park feature, the camera will open and it will recognize that feature. And you could see here AI in progress. It tells you the level of accuracy, for example. Sometimes it gives you questions. So we try to make this game more interactive in different ways so people don't get bored. And sometimes we give different information. Like, for example, we implemented something similar for a zoo environment. So it gives children more information about animals, but at the same time, they can walk around. Also, we do step counts and so on. And we did a little version on a small wearable that can be given by the, like, for example, because of that some people might not have mobile phones, we started to think, what if someone doesn't have a mobile phone? What if the park managers of the park venue can give people devices, they can use it and give it back at some point. So we looked at different options where we can make it more accessible to people and, can be free and they can get some rewards and so on. So it's called Tag with Me, and we work even with the hospital, mental health hospital in Nottingham, to support them in a way that they help mental health patients to walk and do their own exercises. It's another example from Zoo. On the, for other application, and you mentioned the fidgeting tool, we started to look at how can we engage users from different backgrounds to express themselves. I mentioned before the fidgeting tools, ways to detect stress, for example. So we worked with a special needs school in Nottingham, and we invited them to come to our lab. For example, the fidgeting tool that you've seen it before, it was a cubic shape, but then they suggested that we don't like this. We wanted this shape. So we helped them to utilize or use the 3D printer to print their own design. And that's in a way that you engage people in the way they like, especially for children or vulnerable people. They feel like they have the choice to make. I could show you very quickly an example from, let's take a while. You could see here the park that I mentioned, but I just want to show you this. We applied this in a hospital environment, but then around the hospital, we didn't have any sculptures or any specific features. It was like just a garden, big garden. So we found a way to engage the users or the patients themselves to create their own paper maches. So they designed their own sculptures, embedded, and it was waterproof. We spent ages to figure it out. And the exercise itself was very interesting because, the patients came around and they designed this. It was part of the experience. And they were able to use, you could see here the AI trying to detect this particular paper mache figure. There are many, many examples, but the key for that is the co-design, a co-creation aspect. So whenever we want to solve a problem, we bring the end users, their carers, sometimes the teachers, whoever, to the lab or to work with us to start to understand their requirement and then respond to that with possible technologies.
Very fantastic work. Thank you. So I want to come back to Teresa because we discussed the way in which the European strategy, like the AI Act in particular, can limit the ethical risks of tiny machine learning application, and we neglect a bit like the positive goals also of this legal proposition that is one of the major one is to build trust in society for AI and more in particular for tiny machine learning application, and it is the focus of this debate. So I wanted to ask first to Teresa and then to the other panel, what is your definition of trustworthy AI, and how do you think that like laws and policies can help developers and users in building an AI that is more trustworthy? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have talked about the regulation, which is just part of the European strategy, because before the regulation came out, the European Commission tasked a committee, a group of experts, which developed a set of guidelines. So to some extent, the regulation was inspired or prepared by guidelines which are not mandatory, but they should be inspirational, if you like, or at least should guide the actions of developer, designers, and organizations involved in AI projects. And these guidelines are called the Trustworthy AI Guidelines. So they are meant to guide AI developers and deployers to build trustworthy AI systems. So systems that can be trusted by people, by the users. And for me, this means, first of all, a more inclusive design. So Eiman was calling now and was recalling some projects involving people. And I like this idea that tiny machine learning, which recalls this, I mean, smaller technology, smaller scale, at least could be much more wider as compared to large models in involving people, larger in their capacities to also engage directly people that can be affected or that can be potential users, to provide data, but also provide data in being aware of the design of the systems, the projects. And I think this is an important strategy. So to co-create, co-design, and make aware of potential risk by posing questions. So I think that building trustworthy AI systems as a second element after involving people is posing questions. So ask, what are the purposes of these systems that I'm designing? What are potential risks? What are the harms and the consequences that this risk can pose to people? So, and there is no, I mean, answer, there is no recipe for building measures or mitigate the risk. I think that we should, building this trustworthy AI system is more like an art rather than a science or a specific technology. And so I think this is a common effort. And yeah, so, and this is, I think, something that designers and design team will do in the future, in the years to come, because these systems will increasingly be built by larger groups involving also different people, also with different expertise. And so it is, I mean, this is also a challenge. Yeah, I think this is also fascinating because this technology will increasingly affect us, and this will also require different ways to build these systems, not just necessarily thinking that we are building technical artifacts, but more socio-technical systems that are integrated into society.
Okay, so I leave the word on this definition, in your opinion, to Marco.
Yeah, maybe from the angle of the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals. So, the SDGs were set almost 10 years ago in 2015 by the United Nations. There are 17 of them that range from, ending poverty to zero hunger to agriculture, environment, and so on. Important point about the SDGs is that they're all interconnected. So you cannot end hunger if you don't have, gender equality, for example. And many people have, written papers about the role that AI can play in the SDGs. So if you think about, zero hunger, we need to produce more food. And to do so, we can use AI. We can use, satellite images, data from sensors, from weather station to find out where fields should be irrigated. So there's a big role that AI can play in the SDGs. But there's also some weak points. So one of them is that we're also polluting with AI, right? So those are very hungry, systems in terms of energy. So we're trying to solve an issue and we're, polluting at the same time. So TinyML has a big advantage from that point of view. These systems are extremely low power because they're kind of specialized in one specific topic, in one specific issue. They only recognize a person in this case. And the other big critique is that the agenda of AI has been driven by, industrialized countries and by, rich countries. So how can you solve SDGs if you don't hear the voice of, people that live in developing countries that can use AI? So that's another big advantage of very strong point for TinyML. As these systems are so cheap, they can be used by researchers from the Global South to find out how to solve the SDGs by having the devices in their hand, the technology in their hand. So again, it's much more inclusive than the traditional AI, I would say.
Thank you very much for this interesting point of view that I share with you. And now, I have the same question for Eiman.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, exactly that. I mean, the work that you do, for example, in terms of detecting malaria and the potential life-saving, for many, many people, we maybe, I mean, if there's more funding, more support for that kind of work, you could save so many lives. And that's something we don't want to take away from, researchers. We need to increase that because, the benefit it can, be huge. Similar to that, that's in terms of developing countries, but for even developed countries, again, I go back to UK because, that's where I know what's happening. When it comes to the national health services, for example, they can't cope with the number of patients, especially after COVID. So the only way to deal with that, because the waiting list for treatment is very long. If you want to take an appointment with your doctor, you have to wait for long. So in order to keep people healthy, you have to start using technology, personal devices and so on, so they can take care in a way that you prevent diseases, but at the same time, you try to deliver treatments in time or diagnosis and so on. So with personal devices, you could do that. So we need to find a balance between supporting researchers, scientists who are trying to build technology and AI for good, but at and they also know how these devices can be misused, because if you stop these people from doing that, who will be able to understand technology and inform authorities or policing services about the potential of misuse. So if we have this kind of balance between using or developing technologies to respond for real world needs, but at the same time understand technology and make sure that it falls in the safe hands, or at least if it's in the wrong hands, we chase these people and make sure that they stop doing this. There's a difference, for example, in my opinion, when we look at the development of AI in research, and organizations that are trying to build technology for good, or organizations that doing it for profit, right? So sometimes, unfortunately, there's no distinction. So these regulations sometimes go heavy on some of us who try to do the good work and the ethical application, sometimes very lengthy. So if we can find this balance to allow people to speed up the process and come up with these solutions, but at the same time make sure that women monitor the industry that is trying to create so many AI technologies. Sometimes it's not just the ethics, but also the waste of resources. So many tools, so many devices that are not needed. So we need that kind of balance.
Thank you very much. I wanted also to discuss a bit relating to the trustworthy AI, how much knowledge do you think that is needed to trust really the AI from the part of the user, from the side of the user? How much do a typical user do need to know about the tiny machine learning application?
So the end user.
The end user
themselves. So like what I said before, at least from in my lab, we bring the users to us whenever possible. I mean, sometimes we have to follow ethical procedures that are lengthy and so on. But we try to, as much as possible, when possible, to bring people to understand technology. We have conducted many co-design workshops. Like, for example, we spend a lot of time in parks, and I mentioned before the policing services. We brought many charities and organizations, and we demonstrated technology exactly like that, but also Sometimes we show all different kind of configurations and possibilities and let the users or organizations that care for vulnerable people to come with some kind of solutions after they understand that. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was calling part of a meeting with industry, and and they were talking about education. I don't know if you remember our meeting in Cambridge. I mentioned that we should do education in terms of learning how to use AI, but also we should increase the level of educational activities for end users. So they understand technology, and then they come back to us again and say, oh, can we do this in this way? Can we do that? But if they don't know how it functions, how it works, what are the costs, what are the challenges, how big is the technology, it's difficult. So I go back to the concept of co-design. That's the key.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eiman. So I have my last question for Marco before the public question, very short. So I wanted to ask him to describe the most successful application of tiny machine learning in developing countries, and also if he can say something about training activity for end users also in developing countries if they are begun even that.
Yeah, I will start with the training. So we organize many with train, thousands of people, and all our training courses are completely open. So if you're interested in TinyML, the website is tinymledu.org. It's hosted by Harvard University, and all the slides, all the videos are publicly available, so you can get started with TinyML quite easily. Looking at applications, they're extremely diverse. So we had people from Zimbabwe doing foot and mouth detection in cows. So they stick this device in the mouth of the cow, and they can find out if there is this foot and mouth disease, as an example. Then have many other cases, again, where they're using TinyML for diseases of plants. There's one group in Argentina that uses TinyML, these tiny devices, on turtles to study the animal behavior. That's a kind of a complete field by its own. So many people working on, animal behavior using these tiny devices, because again, you can monitor the animal, and understand how it's behaving, how it's moving, if it's in, the sun, in the shade, or what kind of movement it's taking. There's research on water quality. Really, you name it. The interesting aspect from my side is that, these communities come up with their own issues and their own applications. So there's not something that we drive, but it's something that local communities drive by themselves. Before ending, how was the experience with this device? Were you all recognized as people? Yeah? Okay, good. Sorry? It says person. It draws a box around. Okay. So this means that, it also poses an issue of, how can I say, ethical issues, right? Because now the model is embedded in the device. So if it doesn't work, you need to reprogram the device. So that exactly. So yeah. So the system isn't biased. Good. Okay.
So now we have 10 minutes, a bit less than 10 for question for public. So please raise your hand. So I see a raise hand there.
Thank you. I have a question for Professor Zennaro. So first of all, thank you to all the speakers for the interesting topic you have spoken about. And you talk about the importance of taking some action and strategies in order to reduce the differences between developed and developing countries for AI usage and possibilities. I would like to ask you a question regarding inside the same country. So not only for developing, but also for like Italy or another European country, if there is the necessity of taking some actions against the possibility that AI can increase the gap between poor social classes and rich social classes. So we are seeing in the world, especially in America, but not only, that the big tech companies are richer and richer, and the gap between poor and rich people within the same country is increasing. And so I would like to ask you what you think about this, if this is a problem and a danger also for AI applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Complex question, I would say, but I would say that this TinyML, allowing people to develop their own models, their own systems, in a way, as Eiman was saying in her first slide, is a, kind of a democratic technology. Because again, the cost of these devices is so cheap that I would say anyone can afford it. In a way, if you have the knowledge on how to run machine learning on these devices, then you can run your own system. This said, again, there's also dangers in that because we have so many of these devices. We had this meeting at ARM just a few weeks ago, and they said that they sell 30 billion devices per year. So it's much more than, PCs or television or any other, device. So there's so many devices that is, of course, an environmental challenge. But in terms of knowledge and on allowing people to run the models, I would say it is a democratic tool. So it would avoid this issue of putting all the power in the hands of few organizations.
There are other questions? No, so I don't see. There is one from there.
Thank you. So I came from a developing country, studied in Europe, and now in Italy, working as an informatics teacher at a European school. The reason why I'm telling all this is I'm teaching my students, the middle school students, the usage of AI, and it's critical to maintain the AI governance or understand the AI governance policy and up to how much they are allowed to use the AI. So even though it may be not directly related to the session, but can you please shed some light on this area that for middle school student, up to how much you feel that AI should be permitted to use? I was giving classwork to my students, and all of a sudden I saw that grade 7 students are using ChatGPT to find an answer. And we need to have regulations for using ChatGPT inside the classroom. So just wanted to hear the point of view. Thank you.
Who does want to answer this question?
I could make a start and then maybe Teresa can. She's more, yeah. So I have a 15-year-old son. He doesn't just use AI, but I'm teaching him how to develop AI algorithms. So I think it depends. Like what I said, knowledge is a key to equip young people with the knowledge of how to develop AI algorithms. I think this is very important, but also how to use it in a responsible way. So they know that these tools are available, but also they know the risks and the benefit and values. I don't know about schools here in Italy, but for example, in my son's school, they had many lessons on the benefits and the negative aspects and how biases and so on. And actually, he came back to me at some point when we had some discussions. There was one time he told me, I don't want to do AI at all in the future. I said, oh my God, because I think after that session he was so worried that, there are so many, negative aspects about AI that he wants to avoid. So again, I had to sit and talk and discuss in a way that, you can use anything in a positive way and negative way. It could have a, positive impact or negative impact. It depends on how you use that type of technologies. But maybe Teresa can.
I agree that education is important. So AI literacy is not only an article of the AI regulation, but is highly recommended by the European strategies and also by many other governments and organizations. And several universities are now trying to provide also AI courses, also to non-computer scientists and non-STEM students, and this is also important for students in high schools, because we need, I think, to equip students in order to deal with these systems, because we will work and we will coexist with systems like this. And I think perhaps for children, the use of certain technology like large language models might be dangerous, I believe, because we need also to develop some capabilities, and there might be non-beneficial interactions in case of an intense use. But at least for high school students, I think it's very hard to avoid or to impose a non-usage, because it's very hard. But education, I think, is a key measure to increase awareness and more responsible use.
Okay, so we have time for the last question.
Hello, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I just have a curiosity. I was thinking about it, that what is the role, I'm just thinking out of the box, of tiny AI could be in war. Like currently the political situation across the globe, we are aware of it. Like bioterrorism, this was a thing which was like very of quite interest. And people are like trying to cope up with that. And now we are talking about tiny AI. So could it be the thing of future, like tiny AI terrorism? Because like we are talking about smartwatches, and you know, a signal could be sent to all smartwatches or something like that could happen. Just thinking out of the box. I would like to have your comments on this. Thank you so much.
So we start from Eiman, I
Yeah,
think.
sure. I like anything else, like any kind of technology. Whenever you develop something, you know, you could use it, let's say, for the good or for the bad. This technology is being developed. It will carry on to be developed. I don't see a way how can we even stop it from. We already have like what Marco mentioned. ARM sells around 3 billion devices, or you know, larger, smaller numbers. So these technologies already spread, you know, around the world. Some of them, I mean, some of these devices cost less than £1-2. So the idea is that this technology is there, and unfortunately, we know from human history that anything can be used in or misused by criminal, by people who have different kinds of agendas and so on. But that's why we need to learn more about these technologies. We can't just stop, you know, learning about it, because, you know, the not very good ones might, you know, start to do all sorts of malicious kind of activities, and we don't know what they're doing. So we need to keep up with all these activities, learn more about the potential of technology. And just to give you an example, just because I work with tiny email and these kind of technologies, I was able to advise and make police about many potential of misuse because of the technical work that we do. When you develop a system, let's say for a park or other kind of applications, you start to discover things and you say, oh my God, like if someone does this for this kind of application, this could be really bad. And then I keep thinking, like, who can I tell about this? We need to find a way where we bring technical people who have these kind of capabilities to report this potential risk from the use of this technology or that before someone starts to use it in this way. So, and I mentioned before as well, is that the only way to tackle this problem is that we develop smarter technology that can stop these kind of you know, harmful activities, whether it's again for used by criminal or you know, attacking someone or something like this. So if we make the technology smarter in a way that can detect potential harm, maybe we can do an intervention before, you know, harm is done. But it's still a challenge.
Thank you very much, Eiman. Maybe Marco want to add something?
Well, maybe something on the positive side, that again, this tiny machine learning, so the model is on the device, so there is no connectivity. So you're mentioning, you know, sending a message to devices. These devices can be not connected to the cloud. So that's, you know, I would say, big advantage. And also in terms of privacy, of, you know, hacking the device and being able to, you know, intercept the traffic going to the device. So from that point of view, it's positive. I really like this idea of, you know, a capacity building for end users, because that is one issue. So now we had some meetings about the fact that these tiny ML models can be embedded in an environment. So now if you buy a TV set nowadays in the US, it will probably have tiny machine learning on board. So it has a small camera similar to this one, Really small one, you cannot even detect it, that will check if you have one person watching TV, two people, if you're on the couch, if you're sleeping or you're awake. So if you're sleeping, Netflix will stop. So that's all fine, but do you know what's going on under the hood? So is this model that is running on the TV fine? Is it biased? Does it recognize, every kind of person, darker skin, different ages, and so on and so forth. So now you know what is TinyML, so the advantages and disadvantages, so you can take, a responsible decision.
And we leave you up with many questions in mind. That is a good starting point for research always. So I want to thank you all the panelists of this fantastic debate, I would say, and all the public, because you have been very interactive. Thank you very much.